Welcome to the Wild Wisdom Podcast, where we learn how to heal our hearts, find our voices, and step into our authentic power as the wild women that we were destined to be. I'm your host, Jessica Love. Settle into whichever way you like to listen to the Wild Wisdom Podcast, and let's get started.
Today, I'm with a special guest, Jenn Reilly. Jenn Reilly is a wholeness coach who helps women reclaim their wholeness, turn motherhood into sacred initiation, and raise conscious kids with embodied power. Hey, Jenn, welcome.
Hey, Jessica. Excited to be here. Feels like an auspicious moment, Mother's Day.
It does. Yeah. So for those of you who are listening in the US, today, the day the podcast is coming out is Mother's Day, and you get to sit with two mamas today or this morning or wherever you are and whatever time it is to chat about the sacred initiations and shifts that we go through as mamas that start, I feel like, during conception and continue throughout our lives. So, who better to have to speak on this topic than Jenn? I'm so excited that you're here and grateful for your energy. And we are astrology girlies on this podcast. I don't know if you know, I am an astrologer. So, I have to ask, what are your big three astrologically?
Well, Pisces, Cancer rising, and a Taurus moon.
Love. I feel like I always say that, but love Pisces. Our last episode was with a Pisces, and we connected in this very spiritual realm. So I'm really excited to get to connect with you and with Cancer and Taurus in your big three. What a beautiful opportunity to serve in the lens of the home and motherhood. It's so astrologically on point for you. So
I'm curious, do you do the astrology of your kids?
So I have read my daughter's
Your
birth
daughter's-
chart. She's a Pisces sun, moon, and rising, which
Oh my gosh, I know one other person like that. That's so cool. Yeah.
really, yeah. So I know one other person who's all Scorpio, but it's so unique. And I think she chose it, Jenn. I delivered at 42 weeks and 2 days. So I got induced the night of 42 weeks. I had been in labor for 3 days, and she still took 2 days after induction. And we did we did natural inductions. We ended with Pitocin because it had gotten to a point where it had been literally forever that we had been in labor. And I really believe that when we are children, we choose our birth chart. And because of that, we choose where we're going to be born and what time and what day. I really do feel that.
Out of all the books I've read about parenting and the podcasts I've listened to, learning my daughter's birth chart and learning my own birth chart by far has been the best tool I've had. It really allows you to understand your child's superpowers and their weaknesses, the voids that they might have that you get to fill as their parent. And it also helps you understand your triggers, your wounding, and your superpowers as a mama to be able to hold that space. If you're interested in having your birth chart read or your child's birth chart read, you can go to the link in my show notes. I'd be so happy to do a reading on you and give this tool to you in a way that is nourishing.
Yeah, it's a special way that they come into the world.
Totally. Do you read your children's birth chart?
Oh my God, it's so helpful. I find it's like great because there's a piece of being a parent that like we're here as guides, like they are their own little beings, and like what are all the ways that we can help them discover their gifts. And I love astrology, but I really love I've been diving deep into human design. Are you familiar with? Yeah.
Yes.
I have a manifesting generator who is like has so much energy, and like understanding that dynamic. Like I'm a projector for anyone who's interested in human design. It's just, it was such a helpful lens to just be like, wow, this is like a very specific difference. And like I weave it into how I can homeschool her and help her hone in her gifts. And that's been really wonderful, actually.
Wow, that's so cool. I don't know if you know this because I know you're a parenting expert. Do you know that human design was actually created for parenting?
I did not know it was created for parenting.
Yeah, that was the original intention. So it seems like that was really intuitive for you to do that with your daughter. And when you were talking about your little one being a Manny, Jen, I just saw this like little tornado running around your house, and you're the projector, like holding the frequency, like, okay, I'm just gonna hold this space for you.
Oh my, we
Yeah.
literally play a game when we go for like a walk. I'm like, we play a game called yo-yo, where she runs up, I go yo-yo, and then I say yo-yo, come back. And she'll, as I'm just walking, she's like running up and then running back and then running up and then running back. But it's like a way that she's listening and then bringing extra energy.
That's so sweet. I absolutely love that. Wow. Yeah, what a great example. My daughter and I are both projectors, and so that has a blessing and a curse, I think. But the blessing is she loves to sleep and I love to rest. And we are very fortunate that she's been a pretty good sleeper, like waking up to feed, going back to bed type of gal. So not to brag, but how it is. I feel like our whole life revolves around sleep. But it is funny because she will fall asleep. Like she'll get really fussy and literally pass out anywhere under any circumstances. And so it is interesting to always be prepared, to have a snack available, a blanket, some shade, some kind of, nap time accessories. And I'm curious for you, like, I wonder, well, I guess I can just speak on behalf of like having a daughter with the same design. Interesting, because when I see her, and my instinct is to nurture, as our instincts are as mothers, without question for the most part. It's interesting how I get mirrored back to me that I don't do that with myself, where 5 to 6 times out of 10, if I need to take a nap, I don't. I've gotten better. It used to be like 8 out of 10. So sometimes I do. Today I took one. But it's interesting how I'm so quick to create that environment for her. And
Yes.
with me, I'm like, oh, I need to now clean the house, write my book, do my workout, cook, where I could just be snoozing away also. So
That is such a typical, I mean, that's kind of, I think you're putting a finger on one of the hardest parts of motherhood, and is how we have, I mean, it's both a combination of our environment and our culture and like our own conditioning. And I find a lot of times with mothers, it's like the limitations, like the walls that we build within ourselves are like the hardest ones to take down. And it's like our own story that's like, oh, I can't rest. Oh, if I'm not productive, I'm lazy. And all that like happens in childhood, like our childhood, right? It's like, oh, well, like, and it's so casual. It's so like, it's the parent like making a judgment or a comment about a friend or an aunt or someone else on TV, even like, oh, they're lazy. They're not doing blah, blah, blah. And how like little sponges, I think, especially projectors, super spongy. We just like absorb these stories and inner narratives, and it just ends up hijacking and running the show. And so I try to be like mindful, and we're human. So like, we're gonna traumatize our kids. We're gonna like, I mean, like lowercase t trauma, every parent's gonna like have something. It's just part of being human. But there's like a way of just modeling, right? Like model what you want for your child. Like if you want your child to thrive, you want your child to take naps, and it's like, all right, I guess I gotta model like at least resting and listening to my body, because they're gonna co-regulate with us, and they're gonna feel that like pushing beyond our nervous system. And that becomes the template of like their nervous system.
wow, I can see that. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm curious, I'm hearing that right now you live very connected to your nervous system and taking the space to honor it and having your child as almost a motivator to do that because you know that you're co-regulating with them. Has this always been something you've done? Was this something you did before motherhood? Or I'm curious, how has motherhood changed you specifically? And if you would like to speak about the initiations that one goes through upon conception.
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you. And I love this because I just want to model like I was a hot mess. Like when I became a mother, I had no idea. I didn't even know what trauma was. I didn't know what I knew we had nervous systems, but I didn't know about nervous system work or any of this. I just had like a really visceral knowing of I was aware of patterns of like certain things that had happened in my family, and just like I really felt called to like, this has to end with me. I'm not, and I really got, it just became very bright to me, the awareness of how I'm never going to be able to say, hey, like don't date somebody like me, like I married, or don't do this thing that I've like don't, you know, like throw your needs under the bus so that you can make everybody else more comfortable. Like don't, you know, like all these things that we want for our kids. I knew that the only way I would really be able to empower her, like support her, nourish her, to like step into that kind of power in her own, like her own body, was for me to model that. And so it became, and actually my divorce, like that whole process of like stepping away from old patterns and stepping away from that relationship became this like total chasm in like my like motherhood journey. And it was right when we talk about motherhood initiation, you know, it was right after postpartum. So we were just talking about on the call, like motherhood is such an amazing initiation. Like I feel like the more women I talk to, it's like the more we realize that we don't realize like what's happening in our feminine bodies. And so when we talk about feminine rights and, you know, women first and, you know, all this like really positive stuff, we want to empower our daughters. Well, let's start with what like at the core makes us women, and that's like our cycle and these feminine initiations. And it's like when we come into menarche, we come into maidenhood. You know, when we give birth, we come into motherhood. And this initiation, every feminine initiation, even there's like an infantile puberty at like from 6 months into 2.5 years.
Really?
Yes, where like your daughter is getting pumped with estrogen levels that you have. And estrogen does so much work on how it actually shapes our brain and like shapes how we think. It changes, you know, and so does progesterone. So like there are major hormones that are actually influencing like how we see our reality, how we view relationships, how we prioritize relationships, and that's shifting over our cycle. And then when you come into motherhood, it's almost like you're going through one massive cycle in a way, because your estrogen levels rise 100 times what is normal right before you give birth.
Wow.
And then it drops as soon as the placenta leaves. So when we talk about postpartum, and I feel like there's so much postpartum depression now, and it's such a challenging time for women, you know, and I think that there's a part of it is just chemical and hormonal, and that is like, if that is you, please get help. You're not alone. Many women get help. And I think part of it is just the disconnect between these cultural norms that have kind of almost forgotten our like feminine biological way of being, and have lost the art of how motherhood is this like really sacred initiation. And it's informed by our biology. Like our brain literally clips away, it's called synaptic pruning, and we clip away different connections in our brain. And this happens at menarche, it happens at birth, and it also happens in menopause. And so you're literally clipping away connections in the brain, building new connections, and your hormone levels shift. Like cortisol kind of just generally rises a little bit more. And so, and that's biologically by design, so that we are more attuned to our child and in protective mode. So, and if we already have high cortisol levels because we're on screens all the time, we're stressed out about working and getting all this stuff done and working on a linear schedule, and we're already like ignoring our biological needs, our cyclical needs throughout the month to rest. And we've have all these stories in our head about how rest is, you know, lazy or whatever it is, you know, it's not productive. Like we were just talking about this in my motherhood circle. It's like, you know, you can kind of take a day to rest and you're like, okay, I'm taking a rest day. But if you really need like multiple days of rest, it's like, whoa, that's too much. And so there's like a way of coming more into like supporting our rest.
Remember hearing something about how many women go back to work 3 weeks postpartum in the United States? And I really want to find the stat because it was pretty high.
So that statistic is that 1 in 4 women in the US return back to work at 2 weeks postpartum.
I went back to work at 3 weeks postpartum, and I was so blessed that about after 2 or 3 months, I was able to leave my job, and my husband was able to take care of us financially. But
I mean, even 3 months, which I think is most women in America would be like, wow, 3 months of maternity leave is generous. And they might try to use all of their PTO to try to maybe squeeze it to 4 or 5 months or something. And some companies are starting to let women maybe take some unpaid time off. But you go to like, Europe and Canada and like all these other countries where like they really respect this time in women's life and support it. It's like at 3 months, I remember my daughter, like my daughter being so tiny and so fragile and still like really, I just felt like how deeply she needed me. She had been inside of me and thinking, oh, well, this is the time when everyone goes back to, oh my God. And it was like this kind of bubble popped of like, something's not right. Cause I just figured, I'm like, something maybe is broken with me. And I know a lot of women kind of feel this like, something wrong with me? Because everyone else goes back to work and puts their kid in daycare and, and I get that we think that that's okay and that's like, so, but they're so fragile and so small at that stage. It just doesn't feel right, or it didn't feel right for me. And I know everything works differently for every woman.
right. I also feel like unfortunately, because of what we were just talking about with the way our country handles moms, it is just simply not economically possible for a lot of moms. And I think that is really hard because like I think I thought about that myself. I had a similar reflection to you of my baby's so little, and I was in a similar boat in the sense of I was offered unpaid leave, and so my maternity leave was like unpaid, and I was in this place where I was like, I literally need to make money, and so I just worked as long as I could, and then fortunately we were able to work things out where I was able to stay at home, and I still do most like 95% of the time, 90%, and I'm really lucky. But it is, I really sympathize with all moms, period. And I especially sympathize with working moms because I feel like I could see, it's tough, right? I think that it's important for moms to stay at home if they want to, of course. And then we only talk about moms who want to go back to work and moms who want to stay home. And I feel like often moms who want to stay home but can't get left out of these conversations. And so I just want to like share some love to those mamas right now because they deserve to have spaces too where, that's a whole different set of responsibility. And also like I just have a lot of empathy for them. I want them to know that you're not a bad mom for having to go back to work and like having to provide for your family. But gosh, I can't imagine that.
It's a tough place where I feel like there's a lot of middle ground in there. It's not black or white anymore. And I think that there's a happy medium for a lot of women that might look like part-time, like coming back to work part-time in those first early years. Like, cause it's nice to have some, like some connection to like a lot of people wrap their identity in work, right? It's like this has become so much of who I am, and so much you're already going through such a huge transition, and then you have to go back to work. Where I think that's part of like what I'm really passionate about right now. I'm actually hosting interviews with women about their back to work experience because there's helping women kind of take down these inner walls, because a lot of it is like, do I want to go back to work? Like I've worked with a lot of women where they've stopped breastfeeding early not because they wanted to stop breastfeeding early and that's what felt right for them, but because they didn't want to be inconvenient at work.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of like weird structures and stories that we have that are preventing, I would say, like, I think it's such a confusing time. You're not getting as much sleep. Your brain is literally being rewired. And, you're in mom fog, right? Like the mommy brain is a real thing. And it's like, we need to be really gentle while the nervous system is rewiring in that stage. And then it's like, we're trying to figure out these cultural norms and coming back to work. And it's like, it's so challenging to find a way that really works for you. And I really want to support organizations to also open up. Like when you say you're a woman first organization, you support women's rights. Well, finding a way to really work with women and check in with them and have it not be weird, because that like totally, right? It's like, oh, well, she's back to work and we're just go back to how things are. And it's like that, like take time to get to know the new woman who is here. And like, I would love to see more hybrid offers where it's like, yeah, you come back to work 1 day a week, 2 days a week, and kind of gradually grow from there so that you can. And I'm working with one organization, or I'm working with some clients at an organization where they're talking about building policies where they hire childcare for when women are traveling and breastfeeding, so they can bring their babies and like be in connection and still, you know what I mean? Because it's like,
yeah,
it's so nice to be able to like, how do we build it more? So there's the, supporting moms to step into like, well, what do I actually want? Because it's hard to even know what you want when you've kind of been so conditioned in these ways. And then there's, creating systems and structures from organizations to support women to actually make choices from a place that like, it's like what they actually want, not because they have to do. And it's like that point of like, I have to do the daycare and I have to take care of my bills. And it becomes such a tight space. And it's so hard because it's like, we're not even getting the best out of each other at that point.
Oh, totally. No, I couldn't agree more. I love what you said about the energy of have to. And I think the more we can support moms with work like you're doing, spiritual work, holistic work, legislative work, professional work of, making the world a safer and better place for moms, I think the more our planet will heal, because we all came from a mother, period. So I want to go back and ask a question about the phases of motherhood before we run out of time. Between menarche and I forgot what the menarche, womanhood, or I forgot what they all were. So if you wouldn't mind just going through those 4 ones again and just briefly share, like power share, maybe 3 superpowers or 1 to 3 superpowers that a woman receives through those transitions. And for listeners who aren't familiar with what menarche is, would you mind just sharing like what age that is or what initiation that is?
Absolutely. I mean, we obviously start, I think everyone knows childhood. I feel like childhood is really this time when you're so permeable and you're absorbing so much from your parents. It's this time of innocence and really like embodying safety and like really being cherished. And so I feel like we hear like cherish our daughters. I don't think we realize how sensitive their nervous systems really are. And to like support healthy hormones like later in life, like really that emotional safety. And so it's like I guess it's like from the parent perspective, how to support our daughters, like validate them, like that's such a huge one. Like there's so much of the impact of estrogen on the brain in childhood. And I guess the superpower of being a child is just being like so carefree and like an innocence and like this like sweetness and being cared for. Like there's a real, I think like in like feminine embodiment, it's like this time to really just receive, like really practice, like you're just receiving and being held and being cared for. And menarche is like when you get your period. So that's puberty. Now, I mean, it happens in girls as young as 8, more typically between like 10 and 12, 14. Some girls later. And that's a whole other, it's kind of almost like going through your toddler phase again, where kids are like, the emotions are really big. They're really rewiring, and their whole nervous system needs a lot of like support in that time. And they come through that threshold into maidenhood. And maidenhood is like, now it's like, I have a cycle. And so there's this whole like awakening to like the sensations of your body and like what's happening to your body. And like the gift of maidenhood is like, is connecting and experimenting and learning this like art of like tending to ourselves. And right. And that's through our experience. And it's like, how do I nourish myself? How do I like move through this part? Like, how do I move through my cycle? How do I connect to my intuition? And how am I now responsible for me? And then we come in, not everyone, but I would say a lot of women who don't necessarily give birth kind of come into that feminine maturation space of like, oh, like the threshold of like giving birth, the threshold of coming into motherhood, of like, or even just this maturation of like, oh, I now know how to tend to myself. And now I'm here to like, I can stand on that foundation. So like every stage becomes a foundation for the next. And so, now in motherhood, it's like, I know how to tend to myself. So I can now, and I've built this skill set of attunement to myself. And I can now use this skill of attunement to attune to my child and tend to nourish their needs. And I can keep myself nourished because I know this like level of nourishment. And then, you come into, you go through menopause and you come into, some people call it the crone or eldership. Like there is like a level of, and it's actually like really activating because your cycle stops. And so this wave that of like, it's like now we don't realize estrogen creates so much impact on the brain around like safety and like a lot of people pleasing. I hear a lot of memes around, it's like in my 40s, I did this. And then in my 50s, I was so confident. And it's like, are you confident or did you just stop producing estrogen?
I wanted to chime in here because there's a lot of astrology that lines up with these cycles, and that is just tripping me out a bit. I'm so grateful you took the time to explain them. Thank you. And I hope that listeners were taking notes and can find like golden nuggets in whatever phase that you are all in who's listening. And when you were talking about the crone phase or the menopausal phase, interesting because we have our second Saturn return in our 50s. And I wonder if that has to do with some of that astrologically, because when Saturn moves through your chart, there's usually a revolution, a rebirth. The second Saturn return in your 50s just so happens to be correlated with this menopausal shift. I just think that's really unique because that is a very active time in one's life on this planet. If you're having a really big, crazy shifts are happening in your life, invitation to see, do you have a Saturn transit happening? Because oftentimes they can be challenging initiations, but at the end you feel on top of the world because you get these new gifts. So, and I love the evolution that we go through as women. And what would you say, is there any wisdom that you would give to a new mama who, we don't know why, maybe it's situational, maybe it's hormonal, maybe it's something spiritual, but they're really struggling with this new phase and this new chapter. Maybe with any of the transitions, what would you give them?
Yeah, it's funny. What comes up is I feel like, please make sure you're eating enough protein. I mean, I feel like it's like there could be lots of advice, but I think actually like making sure that you're literally getting enough nutrients and proteins specifically. And we become very insulin resistant, especially as we get older and as we're going through these hormonal loops, and protein becomes really impactful for how cortisol comes online, and cortisol will disrupt all of your hormones. And so the more you can support stress in your life, so whether that's learning nervous system work or like learning breath work, or literally just asking your partner for more hugs. Like oxytocin will curb cortisol. So there's like, I think that there's a lot of great advice, but I think one of them is just like eat protein. If you have mom rage and you're trying to like mom rage and clean the house, just check in. Have you eaten any protein today? Did you have enough? You know, a lot of like the dips and flows of motherhood, I think, come when we're depleted. And so nourishing yourself, like martyr, like I want to trash martyrdom. Like martyrdom I don't know, was like really popular. And there's all these stories, right? Of like you sacrifice yourself for your kids. And your kids need you nourished. Like they need you to show up and be nourished. They need your nervous system to be as regulated as you can when you're not sleeping. And, you know, one of the best ways you can do that is like just basic stuff like eating enough protein.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I would just say is to just be really gentle with yourself. Like if you notice that self-talk coming up, that inner judge, you know, just acknowledge that it's there and just know like showing up with your kids and just doing your best is enough. Like your kids are going to appreciate that. And I find that the more aware you are, the more conscious of a parent you are, the more you just see how you're screwing up. So it's like, so just know it's not about like the messing up or the where. It's like if you spill the milk, you pick it up. And that's all. Like,
Wow.
Like that repair process with your kid is so much more valuable than trying to be a perfect parent.
Wow. Thank you for that reframe. And thank you for all the wisdom you shared today. I really appreciate it. And I can tell that this work is really embodied in you. And this is work that is so needed on this earth right now. I really do feel that. And you motivated me to have something yummy after this and protein rich. Maybe I love beans right now. I know they're more like fibrous than protein-ish, but I love beans. My body is loving beans at this juncture. So I think I'm going to go have some like refried beans. I like to eat, I'm so weird. I like to eat them with like a spoon or like a chip or like at their own, like so good. How can people work with you, Jenn?
Oh, thank you. You can visit raisingwholeness.org. You can find me on Instagram. But I coach women one-on-one, and I also have like a conscious motherhood mentorship. So it's a lot of working moms, early motherhood that are kind of struggling with a lot of these same things that we talked about. How do I nourish myself? How do I manage depletion and try to go back to work and do all these things? And I have a bunch of free resources on my website. If you're interested in these stages of feminine development, I have like a book on feminine wholeness. I also have a very in-depth cycle guide and a free cycle workshop coming up on May 21st. So if you're interested in learning more how to attune to your body, like I love that you're eating beans and that you're listening to your body. It's really about like listening, like what does my body actually need versus what I think I need. It's just so often we get into the like my self-help, like my self-development becomes like a to-do list. And that's not that, then you're just kind of going off a checklist instead of attuning to like maybe you do just need to like organize your cabinets and like take a nap. But that doesn't seem like self-care enough, right? It's like, no, I should be going to yoga and meeting with my friends and yeah.
Ooh, I love that reminder to come back home to self and intuition. And thank you for sharing your gifts. I'll put all the links for what you mentioned in the show notes. And yeah, thank you for all that are listening. Happy Mama's Day. Happy Mother's Day for those who are moms on this platform. And yeah, see you soon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Wild Wisdom podcast. Really enjoyed this podcast. Go ahead, like, share, and subscribe to spread this wisdom to other sisters who might need it.